Okay, I want you to just close your eyes for a second. Picture a scene that if you saw it in some high-budget Hollywood movie, you'd probably roll your eyes and say, okay, the writers are trying way too hard now.
Right, it's just too unbelievable.
Exactly. So it's the middle of the night. It's pitch black. The date is April 22nd, 1453. You're standing on a hill, and you're overlooking the Golden Horn, this massive, legendary harbor of Constantinople.
It's quiet, maybe a little foggy. And then suddenly you hear this sound.
Yeah.
And it's not the wind, it's not the sea, it's this deep groaning of wood.
Yeah, and the cracking of whip.
The bellowing of thousands and thousands of oxen.
Yeah.
And drums, this steady, rhythmic, almost terrifying beating of drums.
And the torches light up. And what you see, it just shouldn't be possible. You see ships, full-size, 70-foot Ottoman warships with their sails furled, but they aren't in the water.
No, they're moving over the side of the hill.
Over land.
It's one of the most surreal images in all of military history. 80 galleys being physically dragged up and over a steep, forested hill on these greased logs for over a mile.
Why? To get around a giant chain. A simple chain that was blocking the harbor entrance.
It is this incredible moment where the solution to an impossible military problem wasn't some brilliant strategy, and it wasn't diplomacy. It was just sheer brute force engineering, just manpower and will.
It's absolute madness. And it sets the stage perfectly for the guy we're talking about today, because this whole land ship maneuver, this wasn't the idea of some grizzled, battle-hardened general with 40 years of experience.
Not even close.
This was the brainchild of a 21-year-old.
That is the part that always gets me. He was barely out of his teens.
Today on The Deep Dive, we are tackling the life of Mehmed II, better known to the world as Mehmed the Conqueror. And I think for most people, the mental image of an Ottoman sultan is, pretty fixed.
Oh, yeah. You picture this stern warrior figure, maybe a guy with a scimitar and a big turban, looking very severe, very distant.
The scourge of God archetype. The man who basically ended the Middle Ages by smashing the walls of Eastern Rome. And look, he was that. He was absolutely a conqueror in the most literal sense.
But the source material we've been digging through for this, it just paints a picture that is so much more, jarring. It's just full of these crazy contradictions.
We are talking about a guy who was a master gardener, an poet who wrote these incredibly emotional verses under a pseudonym, a scholar who spoke, half a dozen languages? And he's commissioning portraits from Italian Renaissance masters.
And in the same breath, we are talking about a man who legally codified the execution of his own brothers to ensure the stability of the state, a man who impaled his enemies by the thousand and absolutely terrified Europe for half a century.
That's the tension. That's what we're going to unpack today. How does a Renaissance prince, because that is really what he was in many ways, also become the architect of mass impalements and, legal fratricide?
It's a huge question.
We have a massive stack of campaign logs, diplomatic letters, Venetian spy reports to get through. Our mission is to understand how this 21-year-old kid managed to do what entire armies had failed to do for 1,000 years, and whether he was, in the end, a monster, a genius, or maybe both.
And to get there, you really can't start at the conquest. You can't start with the ships on the hill. The whole psychology of Mehmed II is rooted in a really traumatic childhood. You have to go back to what I call the false start.
I love that term for it, because usually when we hear about these great kings, their story is so linear. They're born, they're educated, they take the throne, and they rule. Mehmed's path was just so much messier.
Much, much messier. So he's born in Edirne in 1432. Now, context here is absolutely key. He was the third son of the reigning Sultan, Murad II. His mother, Mehmed II, was a slave concubine.
So not a royal princess from another kingdom.
No, we don't know much about her. Possibly she was of European or Slavic origin. But in the Ottoman system, that wasn't a disqualifier status followed the father. But being the third son, that meant he wasn't the priority. He wasn't plan A for the succession.
He's the spare to the spare.
Exactly. But in the Ottoman tradition, these young princes didn't just sit around the palace. They were sent out to govern provinces to learn the ropes. It was like an apprenticeship in ruling.
So at age 11, Mehmed is sent to Amasya.
Yep. It's a governorship. He has to learn how to manage taxes, how to judge legal disputes, how to command local troops. It's a very real, hands-on internship running a piece of the state.
But then, fate intervenes. His two older brothers die. Suddenly, this 11-year-old is the heir apparent. And then his father, Sultan Murad II, does something that is almost unheard of in history. He quits.
He literally abdicates. He just steps down. Murad had a really rough go of it. He'd been fighting these draining wars on two fronts, in Europe and in Anatolia. He finally manages to sign peace treaties with Hungary in the west and the Karamanids in the east. He looks at the map, sees peace for the first time in years, and basically says, I'm done.
I'm out.
I want to study religion, retire to a nice garden in Manisa, and just relax. So in 1444, he steps down and he hands the absolute power of the Ottoman Empire to Mehmed, his 12-year-old son.
Imagine being 12. In our timeline, you're just starting middle school. And he's handed the nuclear codes. He is the Sultan. And it goes about as well as you would expect.
Right, it's a disaster. The vultures started circling immediately, instantly.
The Christian powers in Europe look at the Ottoman throne, they see a child sitting on it, and all those peace treaties Murad just signed.
They're torn up. And this wasn't just some minor border skirmish. This was a full-blown crusade. It was led by John Hunyadi of Hungary and King Ladislaw of Poland and Hungary. They saw a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to wipe the Ottomans off the map of Europe.
I want to pause on the justification for breaking that treaty, because the sources mention a specific figure, a Cardinal Julian Cesarini. He's the one who really pushes for this.
Yes, the papal legate. He used a very cynical bit of theological logic to convince the king of Hungary to attack. He essentially argued that an oath sworn to an infidel, a Muslim, was null and void in the eyes of God.
So breaking the truce isn't a sin.
He argued it was almost a holy duty.
So the crusade launches.
Yeah.
The Ottoman army is panicking. The Grand Vizier, a guy named Skanderbeg Halil Pasha, who really did not like Mehmed, is panicking. And 12-year-old Sultan Mehmed realizes, I cannot handle this.
It has to be a profoundly humiliating realization for a boy who has been told his whole life that he's a prince destined to rule. So he sends a message to his father, who's off in his garden retreat, begging him to come back and lead the army.
And Murad refuses. He basically says, no, I'm retired, I'm praying. It's your problem now, son. Good luck.
Which is just incredible. And this is where we get the first real flash of the brilliance and maybe the snark that defines Mehmed later in life. He writes a second letter, and this is one of the most famous documents in all of Ottoman history.
It's so good.
It's brilliant. He writes, if you are the Sultan, come and lead your armies. But if I am the Sultan, I hereby order you to come and lead my armies.
Checkmate, Dad. There's no way out of that one.
It worked. Murad II came back, completely crushed the Crusader army at the Battle of Varna, and saved the empire. But then, and this is the crucial psychological blow for young Mehmed, he stayed. He took the throne back.
So Mehmed is deposed.
Yeah. Unsultaned, he's packed up and sent back to the minor leagues as a governor in Manisa.
That has to absolutely destroy a kid's ego. You taste absolute power. You fail spectacularly. Your dad has to come and rescue you, and then you're basically grounded for years.
It created a chip on his shoulder the size of the Bosphorus Strait. Most historians agree that his time in Manisa was spent just stewing. He became obsessed. He wanted to prove to his father, to the court, to the world, that he wasn't just some incompetent child.
And he had people in his ear, right? Mentors who were shaping this ambition.
Oh, absolutely. Specifically, a very influential religious figure named Akshemseddin and his tutor Mullah Gurani. They whispered a very specific destiny in his ear. They told him his purpose in life, his holy duty, was the conquest of Constantinople.
This wasn't just a random military target. It had this deep religious significance.
Huge. There is a hadith, a saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad that says, "Verily you shall conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful leader will he be, and what a wonderful army will that army be."
So they're telling him, this isn't just about glory, Mehmed. This is about you fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. It's not just about territory. It's about spiritual validation. It's your destiny. So when his father finally died in 1451, and Mehmed took the throne for the second time, he was 19 years old. And he was a completely different person.
No more asking for help.
None. He was aggressive, he was secretive, and he was singularly focused. The Byzantine Emperor at the time, Constantine XI, actually tried to play these old diplomatic games with him, sending envoys to demand more money, thinking Mehmed was still that incompetent kid from the first reign.
He could stay.
Huge. Mehmed didn't even bother responding diplomatically, he just started building.
Let's talk about the preparation for 1453.
Yeah.
Because he didn't just march an army up to the walls. He strangled the city first.
It was a strategic chokehold, a brilliant one. He looked at the Bosphorus Strait, that narrow strip of water that connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. Constantinople relied on grain shipments coming down from the Black Sea ports to survive.
So if you control the strait,
you control the city's food supply. His grandfather had already built a fortress on the Asian side. So Mehmed went to the European side, directly opposite, and in a ridiculously short amount of time, built Rumeli.
The name is so intense. The source is translated as the fortress on the land of the Romans, but colloquially it was known as the throat cutter.
And it was literal. He installed these massive cannons right at the water level. Any ship passing through now had to lower its sails, acknowledge the Ottoman presence, and pay a toll if they didn't. Well, we have the account of a Venetian ship that tried to run the blockade.
The captain thought he was fast enough.
He thought he could use the current and the wind to just zip past the guns. He was wrong.
Badly wrong.
A single stone cannonball weighing hundreds and hundreds of pounds shattered the ship's hull.
I agree.
The crew was captured and beheaded, but the captain, Mehmed, had him impaled on a stake and displayed on a rocky outcrop visible to anyone sailing by.
It's a billboard.
It's a billboard for the rest of Europe that says, "The rules have changed. I'm in charge now."
Which brings us to the siege itself. Spring 1453. The scale of this whole operation is it's hard to wrap your head around.
It's asymmetrical warfare at its most extreme. Inside the city, you have maybe 7,000 defenders, a mix of Byzantines and Genoese and Venetian mercenaries.
7,000.
Outside, Mehmed has an army that's estimated somewhere between 80,000 and 200,000. But numbers alone don't break the Theodosian walls. These were a triple layer of fortifications that had stood for 1,000 years.
They were legendary.
Attila the Hun couldn't break them. The Arabs couldn't break them. They were the ultimate defensive technology of the ancient and medieval world.
So Mehmed decides to bring in new technology to break the old technology. We have to talk about Orban.
The gun for hire, the master mercenary engineer. Orban was a Hungarian, a master cannon founder, and ironically, he had actually gone to the Byzantine Emperor first. Yes. He offered to build him super weapons to defend the city, but the emperor was broke. He couldn't afford Orban's salary, so Orban just shrugs, walks across the battle lines to the Ottoman camp.
And Mehmed has the money.
Oh, he has the money and the vision. He asks Orban, "Can you build me a cannon that can smash the walls of Babylon?" Orban says, "I can cast the cannon, but I can't guarantee the aim." And Mehmed essentially says, "Cast it. I'll worry about the aim."
And this is the birth of the Basilica Bombard.
It was a monster. I mean, we're talking about a tube 27 feet long. It fired a stone ball that weighed over 1,300 pounds. It took 60 oxen just to move the thing.
And when they test-fired it back in Ader,
the sound was so powerful they had to send out criers to warn pregnant women in the area because they thought the shockwave could cause miscarriages.
and when that thing hit the walls of Constantinople,
It turned 1,000-year-old masonry into dust. But there was a problem. The reload time was terrible, maybe 3 hours between shots, because the barrel got so hot it would crack if they didn't constantly cool it with oil.
so the Byzantines had time to repair the damage.
Exactly. They would frantically rebuild the wall with rubble and barrels of dirt in between shots. It became this slow, grinding war of attrition. The cannon would knock it down, they'd build it back up.
But the city still had a lifeline, the sea. As long as they could get supplies from their Genoese and Venetian allies, they could theoretically hold out forever. And the Ottomans couldn't get into the main harbor because of the Great Chain.
A massive iron chain floated on wooden logs, strung across the mouth of the Golden Horn. The Ottoman Navy tried to break it multiple times and failed miserably. And this is the point where the siege almost collapsed for Mehmed.
Really?
Yeah, his troops were getting restless. The old guard viziers, the ones who never liked him, were telling him, "Give it up, kid, it's impossible. A European relief army's going to show up any day now and crush us."
And that brings us right back to our intro. The ships on the hill. This was the moment that proved he wasn't just a kid with a big cannon.
It's the lateral thinking. It's pure genius. He realized he couldn't break the chain, so he just circumvented it. He mobilized thousands of workers to level a path behind the Genoese colony of Galata. They laid down these massive wooden planks, greased them with animal fat and olive oil.
And in a single night,
In a single night, they hauled 70 or 80 ships up the hill over the top and splashed them down into the water on the other side, behind the chain.
the psychological impact on the defenders inside the city must have been absolutely devastating.
Can you imagine? You go to sleep thinking your flank is totally secure because of this impenetrable chain, and you wake up to the sound of Ottoman sailors chanting morning prayers from their fleet, which is now sitting in your backyard.
It's over.
It broke their morale. And more practically, it stretched their defenses too thin. They had to pull men off the mainland walls to guard the much weaker sea walls. It was the beginning of the end. On May 29th, 1453, after a brutal 57-day siege, the final assault began.
The fall of the city is a chaotic, bloody affair. But I want to focus on the moment Mehmed himself enters the city. He's 21. He has just done the impossible. He rides his horse to the Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in all of Christendom. And what does he do?
He dismounts. He stoops down, takes a handful of dust, and pours it over his turban as a sign of humility before God. And then he wanders through the ruined halls of the Eucolion, the ancient palace of the Caesars.
And this is where the poet side of him comes out. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't give a victory speech.
No, he quotes a Persian couplet from the poet Saadi.
The spider is curtain bearer in the palace of Chosroes. The owl sounds the relief in the castle of Afrasiab.
It's this profound reflection on how fleeting power is. One day you are the Roman emperor, the next day spiders are literally spinning webs in your bedroom curtains. It shows this depth of character you just don't expect from a warlord in the middle of a sack. He was deeply, deeply aware of history.
And speaking of history, this brings us to a really major insight from the sources. Mehmed didn't see himself as the destroyer of Rome.
No, not at all. Quite the opposite. He saw himself as the conqueror who has earned the right to possess it and, in his view, save it. He immediately adopted the title Caesar I Rome,
Which means?
Caesar of Rome. His logic, from his perspective, was airtight. The seat of the Roman Empire is Constantinople. I hold the seat, therefore I am the emperor.
Did anyone else buy that? I have to imagine the Pope wasn't thrilled about a Muslim Caesar of Rome.
The Catholic West definitely laughed at it, or rather, they feared it, but they certainly didn't recognize it. But here's the critical nuance. The Orthodox Church more or less accepted it, and that was entirely by design.
He didn't wipe out the Christians in the city.
No, he sought out a specific man, a monk named Gennadius Scalarius.
And he was known for being staunchly anti-Catholic, right?
Viciously so. Gennadius famously said, "I would rather see the Turkish turban in the city than the Latin mitre." He hated the Pope and the Catholic Church for what he saw as their betrayal. So Mehmed finds him, makes him the new patriarch, and gives him authority over all Orthodox Christians in the entire empire.
That is just. It's 4D chess. By empowering the anti-Catholic faction of the Greeks, he ensures they will never, ever unite with the Catholic West to launch a crusade against him.
Exactly. It's strategic tolerance. He integrates the Orthodox Church into the Ottoman state machinery. He gives the patriarch the rank of a pasha, makes him the second largest landlord in the empire. He wanted to rule a universal empire, not just a Muslim one.
And he had this fascination with the deeper history, too. The sources mention he actually went to the site of ancient Troy.
Yes, about 10 years later, he walked the ruins of Troy and reportedly told his companions that by conquering the Greeks, the Byzantines, he had finally avenged the Trojans. He saw history as this long, continuous narrative arc, and he was the climax.
He's the avenger of Hector.
He's the avenger of Hector, he's the new Alexander the Great, and he's the new Caesar, all rolled into one.
So he has the title, he has the capital,
Yeah.
but he did not settle down. The section on his later campaigns is just, it's exhausting just to read.
The man was an endless campaigner. He spent pretty much his entire adult life on a horse. He expanded into Serbia, Bosnia, Trebizond, the Morea in Greece. But we have to talk about the personal rivalries, because there are two men who really defined his later years, and the stories are just wild.
Okay, let's start with the big one, Vlad.
Vlad III, Vlad Dracula.
And the history here is intensely personal. It's not just two kings fighting over territory. They knew each other as kids.
Intimately. Vlad and his younger brother Radu had been sent as child hostages to the Ottoman court to ensure their father's loyalty. He grew up alongside Mehmed. He probably studied in the same classrooms, trained with the same weapons masters. He learned Ottoman military tactics, the language, their psychology. He knew the system from the inside out.
So when Vlad eventually goes back to rule Wallachia and decides to stop paying tribute to the Sultan, he knows exactly who he's poking.
He does. And when Mehmed sent envoys to demand the tribute, Vlad committed an act of just, incredible diplomatic desecration. The Ottoman envoys refused to take off their turbans in his presence. It's a religious custom.
A sign of respect.
Exactly. And Vlad said, "I will help you keep them on forever." He had his men hold them down and nail the turbans to their skulls.
That's a declaration of war.
A very clear one. So Mehmed marches north with a massive army. But Vlad knows he can't fight him in an open battle.
He's totally outnumbered.
10-1 at least. So Vlad uses terror as his primary weapon. He wages a campaign of pure psychological warfare. He poisons the wells. He burns the crops so the Ottoman horses have nothing to eat. And he even sends people with infectious diseases, leprosy, tuberculosis, the bubonic plague, into the Ottoman camps to mingle with the soldiers.
That's biological warfare in the 15th century.
And then you have the famous night attack of 1462. This is like a special ops mission from a modern movie. Vlad took his best men, disguised them in Ottoman uniforms, and walked right into the middle of the Ottoman camp in the dead of night.
What was the goal?
A decapitation strike. His one and only goal was to find Mehmed's personal tent and assassinate him. They tore through the camp, causing absolute chaos. They actually hit the tent of two of his grand viziers, mistaking it for the Sultan's, but the message was clear. You are not safe, not even in the heart of your own army.
And then Mehmed marches on Vlad's capital, Targoviyati, and what he finds there is the forest.
The Forest of the Impaled. It was a field of stakes stretching for kilometers. Sources say 20,000 bodies, men, women, and children, all impaled. And on the highest stake, right in the center, was the rotting corpse of Hamza Bey, the Ottoman general who Vlad had captured earlier.
The sources say that even Mehmed, a man we know was a hardened killer, was physically sickened by the sight.
He reportedly said, "How can I despoil the lands of a man who does such things?" It was this moment of grudging, horrified respect for the sheer audacity of the brutality. Mehmed actually withdrew his main army.
So Vlad won.
Not exactly. And this is the genius of Mehmed again. He didn't lose, he just changed tactics. He used politics.
No.
He left behind Vlad's younger brother, Radu,
Radu the Fair.
who was also a hostage, but unlike Vlad, Radu had assimilated completely. He was handsome, charming, and totally loyal to Mehmed. Mehmed basically let Radu and the Wallachian nobles, who were tired of Vlad's reign of terror, fight it out. Eventually, Vlad was ousted by his own people. Mehmed won by proxy without losing another soldier.
We tend to see Mehmed as this invincible figure after Constantinople, but the sources are clear that he did take some serious losses. The siege of Belgrade in 1456 was a total disaster for him.
A complete and utter failure. He went up against John Hunyadi again, the man who had defeated the crusade when Mehmed was a boy. During battle, the Ottoman lines broke, and Mehmed, trying to rally his troops, charged into the melee personally.
He fought himself.
He did. He killed a knight in single combat, but then he took a javelin to the thigh. He was badly wounded and had to be carried off the field unconscious. The Ottomans retreated in disarray. It was a huge humiliation.
And then there was Skanderbeg in Albania.
Another former hostage.
Yes. It seems like the Ottomans had a really bad habit of training their own worst enemies.
Skanderbeg was a military genius. He held out in the mountains of Albania for decades. Mehmed led multiple armies against him personally, and he could not break him. It was guerrilla warfare before the term even existed. Albania only fell to the Ottomans after Skanderbeg died of natural causes, malaria.
So it shows that while the Ottoman war machine was incredibly powerful, it wasn't unstoppable. But Mehmed just kept pushing. In 1480, near the end of his life, he made the move that terrified Europe more than anything else. He landed an army in Italy.
The invasion of Otranto. This is often just a footnote in textbooks, but at the time it was seen as the apocalypse. Ottoman troops seized a major city on the heel of the Italian boot. They were only about 350 miles from Rome itself.
The Pope was literally packing his bags.
Pope Sixtus IV was making concrete plans to evacuate the Vatican and flee to France. The panic in Italy was absolute. They called Mehmed the Grand Turk. The Red Apple was about to be his. They thought, this is it. St. Peter's Basilica is going to become a mosque, just like the Hagia Sophia.
And honestly, if Mehmed had lived another 5 or 10 years,
The history of Western Europe would look fundamentally different. There's no question.
we'll get to his death. But I want to pivot now to the other side of his personality, the side that is so hard to reconcile with all this. We touched on it in the intro, the Renaissance intellectual. Because while he was busy impaling people in the Balkans, he was collecting fine art in Istanbul.
He was a true polymath. He didn't want to just conquer the West. He wanted to participate in its high culture. He invited Italian artists, architects, and scholars to his court. The most famous of these is the Venetian painter, Gentile Bellini.
And that's where we get that iconic portrait Mehmed in profile, wrapped in furs, this sharp, intelligent, almost severe look on his face. That's a Bellini.
It is. And you have to think about how radical that is. In conservative Islamic tradition, distinct portraiture creating realistic images of living things can be seen as a form of idolatry. Mehmed did not care. He wanted to be immortalized on medals and in paintings, just like a European prince.
In his library. The sources that list the inventory are it's wild.
It's a universal library for a universal empire. He had the Iliad and the Odyssey in Greek. He had works on geography, astronomy, mathematics, medicine. He had texts in Hebrew, Latin, Persian, Arabic.
He was obsessed with Alexander the Great, right?
Completely. He supposedly slept with Arrian's biography of Alexander under his pillow. He read about the lives of the popes. He read about the Frankish kings. He wanted to know everything about everyone, friend and foe alike.
And then there are the Christian relics. This part is so strange. The source mentions he collected things like the alleged arm of St. John the Baptist and the stone of the Nativity.
This is a really weird one. Some of his contemporaries in Europe claimed he just held them hostage to squeeze money out of Christian states. But other accounts say he treated them with genuine reverence. There's a story that he would light candles in front of the relics.
That kind of behavior must have really confused people. There were actual rumors in Europe that he was a closet Christian or that he was on the verge of converting.
Pope Pius II actually wrote him a letter, a very, very long letter, basically saying, just a drop of water, Mehmed, just get baptized and I will name you Emperor of the East and the West. We can rule the world together.
Did Mehmed ever answer?
No. He likely just laughed at it. He didn't need the Pope's permission to be emperor. He had the canons. But it shows how much of an enigma he was to his contemporaries. He was a devout Muslim, no doubt, but he wasn't dogmatic in the way they expected.
But not everyone in his own court loved this Renaissance vibe he was cultivating. His son, Bazid, was the complete opposite.
Bazid was pious, deeply conservative, and he hated the Italian influence at court. He thought his father was essentially a heretic, that he was straying too far from tradition. When Bayezid eventually took the throne, one of the first things he did was sell off his father's entire European art collection in the bazaar.
He just got rid of it.
Purged the court of the Western influence. He wanted to take the empire back to what he saw as its pious roots.
Which brings us to the structure of the empire itself. Mehmed didn't just expand the borders. He completely rewired the operating system of the state.
He centralized everything. Before him, the sultans had to share power with these incredibly powerful Turkish aristocratic families like the Skanderbeg clan. Mehmed systematically broke them. He had his own grand vizier, Skanderbeg, executed right after the conquest of Constantinople.
It was a message.
It was a very clear message. No one is untouchable. The only power here is me.
And he replaced those old Turkish families with the devshirme.
The Gathering. This was the system where Christian boys were taken as a tax from the Balkan provinces, converted to Islam, and raised in the palace schools. They were completely cut off from their families, their roots, their culture. They had no loyalties to anyone or anything except the Sultan's person.
It created a meritocracy, but a slave meritocracy.
It did. A man could start as a shepherd in Serbia and end up as the Grand Vizier ruling the entire empire. But legally, he was the Sultan's personal slave. It made the Sultan the absolute, unquestionable center of gravity. Mehmed also made himself physically distant. He stopped eating in public. He built high walls around the new Topkapi Palace. He became the shadow of God on earth, a remote, almost divine figure.
But the most controversial part of his governance, and maybe his darkest legacy, is the law regarding succession.
The law of fratricide.
This is the one that just makes modern listeners shudder. He actually wrote it down into law.
He codified it in his Qanunim, his great book of laws. The line reads, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, "Of any of my sons that ascends the throne, it is acceptable for him to kill his brothers for the common benefit of the people."
For the common benefit of the people. That's the cold utilitarian argument right there.
It's the ultimate trolley problem. Mehmed looked at the history of his own grandfather's reign. After his death, there had been a brutal civil war, the Ottoman interregnum, where brothers fought each other for the throne for a decade.
And this nearly destroyed the empire.
It did. Thousands of soldiers died, villages were burned, the state almost collapsed entirely. Mehmed looked at that and decided that the state-sanctioned death of one or two princes was a tragic but necessary price to pay to prevent a civil war that would kill tens of thousands of common people.
The concept of Nizam-e-Elam, the order of the world.
That was the core concept. It sounds barbaric and monstrous to us, but to him it was an act of mercy for the realm. And it became standard practice. For centuries after him, a new sultan's first act upon taking the throne was to send out the executioners to strangle his brothers with a silk bowstring. The coffin of the old sultan would leave the palace through one gate, and the small coffins of his sons would leave through another.
That is a chilling, chilling image. It's the price of absolute power. So we have this man-conqueror, scholar, poet, fratricide legalizer, and then 1481, he's only 49 years old.
He's in the absolute prime of his power. He gathers a massive new army. He crosses the Bosphorus to the Asian side. The destination is a state secret, as always. Some think he was going for Egypt to fight the Mamluks. Others think he was finally going for Rhodes to fight the Knights of St. John. But he never makes it.
He falls ill.
At a place called the Sultan's Meadow, near Geddes, the official symptoms sound like dysentery or maybe severe gout, which he suffered from, but the historical consensus leans heavily towards something darker.
Poison.
Poison. The timing is just too convenient. He was on the verge of yet another world-changing campaign.
So who are the suspects?
The list is long. Venice is always a prime suspect. Their spy network had tried to assassinate him a dozen times before. But a lot of the circumstantial evidence points closer to home, to his own son, Bayezid.
The conservative son who hated the art and the Western influence.
The son who was tired of waiting in the wings. The son who may have feared that Mehmed was about to pass the throne to his other, more favored son, Sultan. The theory goes that Mehmed's personal doctor, a man named Yakub Pasha, was the one who administered the poison, likely flipped by either Venetian agents or, more likely, Bayezid's faction.
And when the news of his death hit Europe,
it was like VE Day. Church bells rang out in London and Paris. In Venice, the messenger ran into the Senate shouting, "La grande quilla morta!" The great eagle is dead. They lit bonfires and celebrated in the streets because they truly believed they had just dodged extinction.
it's hard to overstate that. They really thought he was coming for Rome next.
And he probably was.
So when we look back at his legacy, he completely transformed the city. He turned a dying, depopulated Byzantine ruin into the thriving metropolis of Istanbul. Though, quick fact check, the name Istanbul wasn't made official until the 1930s, right?
That's right. The Ottomans themselves called it Constantinia, the city of Constantine, for centuries. But Mehmed was the one who repopulated it. He used forced resettlement, the Surgun, to bring Muslims, Christians, and Jews from all over his empire to create a new, cosmopolitan world capital. He laid the foundation for the Ottoman Empire to last another 400 years.
So when you boil it all down, what's the takeaway? Why does Mehmed II still matter to someone listening to this in the 21st century?
I think he matters because he is, in many ways, the prototype of the modern state builder.
Yeah.
He broke the old feudal model. He centralized power. He used new technology, gunpowder, to render ancient defenses obsolete. And he understood the immense power of image and propaganda. He stands with one foot firmly in the medieval world, using impalement and religious rhetoric, and one foot in the early modern era, using cannons, centralized bureaucracy, and Renaissance art.
He's a bridge, a very violent, very brilliant, very complicated bridge.
He literally broke the timeline.
So here's a thought to leave you with. A what if? We know he had troops in Otranto in Italy. We know the Pope was panicking. If Mehmed hadn't drunk that glass of sherbet or whatever it was that was poisoned, if he had lived another 10 years to be 60, would we today be talking about the Ottoman Empire as the legitimate continuation of the Roman Empire? Would St. Peter's Basilica in Rome be a mosque today?
That is the question that haunts historians of this period. It would have rewritten the next 500 years of global history.
If you have a second today, pull up your phone and Google Bellini Mehmed II. Just look at the face of the man who ended one world and started a new one. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Until next time.